You're listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by ADDclasses.com. Visit www.addclasses.com and sign up for free webinars and online events today. Hello, and welcome back to ADHD Support Talk Radio. I'm your co-host, Lynne Edris. And as a productivity and ADHD coach, I help overwhelmed professionals reduce procrastination, improve their time management, and get more done with less effort so that they have more time, more energy, and even more money for what they love most. I am a woman with ADHD myself, guys, so I have been where so many of my clients are, and I've come out the other side, so to speak. I often say, ADHD doesn't go away, but you sure can learn to live well with it. And I know you can share the same success and fulfillment yourself. You can learn more about me, what I do, and the programs and services I offer at www.coachingadvantages.com. And if you text the keyword hack, that's HACK, to the number 33777, you can get my 7 foolproof productivity hacks to help you add hours of free time to your weeks by investing just a few smart minutes each day. Well, today I have with me one of my favorite ADHD professionals. She's a fellow coach and a longtime friend, Diane O'Reilly. And in a moment, Diane and I are going to talk about a topic that's really important for so many of us who have ADHD, and that is boundaries. So welcome back, Diane.
Hey, Lynn, it's so good to be here.
Always good to have you. We were chit-chatting it up a bit before we started the recording.
We were.
And the topic that we're talking about today, I think, is very relevant, at this time. But before we jump in, could you tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Yeah, okay. So I'm ADHD myself and an ADHD life coach. I've been doing this for over 10 years. I got a late diagnosis at 43 when my kids were going through it and went, oh my God, that is me. That explains everything. And then was pretty determined to not have my kids go through what I went through, which was really quite traumatic, and went all the way to addiction, and became a coach and coached with my wonderful Lynn. We were like I don't know what you call us, students together in our in our coaching school. So today I run a practice called DianeO'Reilly.com. I live just outside of Toronto with my family, and I coach adults with ADHD, and I do groups as well.
Awesome. And Diane is fabulous. If you're not familiar with her work, please do check her out. I love the way she frames things, and the way kind of her insights are often a little different than just, the way everyone else talks about things. And that's why I thought talking about boundaries with you today would be a really good conversation for so many of our listeners to hear, especially this time of year, kind of as we're recording this. It's the 3rd week, I believe it is, of November. So we're headed into the winter holidays. So no matter what you celebrate, most of us have, some holidays that are coming up. And anytime when you are around more people than normal, you may have issues with boundaries.
No kidding, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not your typical ADHD topic, boundaries, right?
It should be.
Totally. It's a human topic.
Absolutely.
Number one. So many of my clients struggle with it. The reason that the way I got to it personally was through addiction, because I grew up in an alcoholic home. I was an addict myself. Myself and my husband both in recovery together. So we have done a lot of work to let go of the dysfunction of the past, right? And a lot of that has had to be around boundaries. Growing up in a home that didn't really have any boundaries. All your boundaries were trampled over. And for a long time, when I became an ADHD coach, I noticed that there was this tendency with people with ADHD too. And at first I thought it was because we were in a similar dynamic to people who are in addiction dynamic, where one person is not functioning well. So then the other person of the dynamic starts to overfunction. And you create this dance, this dynamic between you. where, actually one person's boundaries is not being respected and another person is overstepping the mark and another person is under functioning. So yeah, so it's been a personal journey. And then I just, more and more the more mature I get as a coach, I just bring that recovery stuff into my coaching as well. And it's never not relevant for people with ADHD.
It's interesting that you talk about the dynamic. There are so many things that come into play when it comes to boundaries, right? Many of us have trouble establishing boundaries because, we may be people pleasers, right? A lot of us are people pleasers, which, I think a lot of people are people pleasers in general anyway. But I think in the ADHD population, so many of us have messed up enough, or we feel like we've fallen short enough that we go kind of that extra mile to appease. We go that extra mile, to make up for being late, to make up for forgetting things, to make up for the times when we've fallen short. And that obviously that can be a, kind of a personality trait for anyone. A lot of us have that sort of, I always call it like an ADHD optimism, where it is, we see the potential in things, we see the possibilities, and we can overstep others' boundaries as much as allow others to overstep our boundaries, or, basically squash them or ignore them because we get excited about stuff and we are very gung-ho. The having trouble advocating for yourself is pretty common among my clients. And again, back to the whole sort of, not trusting yourself anymore, feeling like you need to make up for shortcomings, all of that. There are many layers to this.
Yeah, Lynn. I mean, shame is what you're talking about,
Big
right?
time, yes.
I can't tell you how many parties I've gone to like 15 minutes early, really awkwardly, because, and that's the shame, that was the rebound, if you like, from being chronically late as a child.
Right.
And then wanting to make up for that and wanting to prove something to myself and other people that I am reliable, that I am a good person. And there is so much. And also another part is the people pleasing that I think is difficult for us is the languaging.
Yeah.
Right? How do you say no? Because people hear boundaries. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of my clients, I think, sell themselves short.
Oh, absolutely.
Actually do, because they are not willing to stand up for what they need. So they will actually go sideways or even, not get what they need, at their expense, just so that they can continue to have a dynamic of peace and harmony with a loved one or a colleague or a peer or a boss or whatever. And I think when I break that down with people, a lot of it's about the language, that they feel like they've got to say, no, you can't do that. And actually you can say, yes, I can do that if ...
Right.
Right. So a recent example. So there are, just to explain, kind of like there are two types of boundaries, internal and external, right? So they're basically the limits we set for what we allow in our life. And so much of that is based on need. So it's very individual. So I might, like an example from me would be like, I don't take my phone into my bedroom. That's a sort of internal boundary. I don't work weekends. I don't take clients after 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And those are learned, because in the beginning, I was like, you want to meet at midnight? I'm good with that. That people please,
Right.
And I had to learn bit by bit and grow the muscle of becoming someone who could say, yes, if, yes, and, yes, but, not no, yes, but I only work this time to this time, So a recent example was a client who was completely overwhelmed, and then she's shut down a lot of areas of her life until she was what she called in survival mode and only doing what she had to do. taking care of her kids, taking care of the house, and barely functioning. And there was lots of opportunities for her to be doing stuff socially with her husband. Like he was really successful, and there was a gala event that she wanted to go to, but she didn't want to go because she knew what it meant socially. She knew that it meant hanging out with all these people before, and they're kind of cliquey and gossipy, and she just did, she's one of us, Lynn. She just doesn't have that ability to bullshit and all that stuff. Not necessarily good at, right? So she was dreading it. So she was like, I can't go. So there was another event where, somebody was going to be there, or a couple of people were going to be there. She found it difficult to get on with. So again, it was like, I'm not going to go. So when you don't have good boundaries, what happens is you create walls.
Yeah.
So she's putting up these walls. That's it. I'm not going. So we talked it out, and she realized that she could say yes if. Yes, I will come if I can come just 5 minutes before we sit down for dinner. Yes, I can come if I can bring a friend. Yes, I can come if I know when it's ending and we have a ride that's ready for that. So, and that came out of a long conversation of just drawing it out from her, what her needs were.
Right.
What it was that. So a need is a clue for you that, you need a boundary.
And so much of that, like, it has to come from awareness, right? A lot of us, most of us with ADHD, I think maybe universally, it isn't instinctual for us to stop and to think and to really kind of ponder what's going on here. Why do I feel so strongly about this? Or why does this elicit this reaction? Or why am I shut down? What's going on? And that's one of the things that I think can be powerful in coaching, is that we kind of create that space to look at things that most of us with ADHD just don't naturally stop to look at.
No. And, in fact, the survival mode is usually overwhelm. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Your higher functioning is offline totally. You are not now functioning as a full-fledged human being. You are in your caveman mode, and you are just, getting through the day, eating, sleeping, getting, A, B, and C done. And an overwhelm, you're even less likely to be able to have that awareness of what is going on. So you just put that big hand up, just no. And I was there for 20 years. I said, no. As soon as the fear came up, the no came up.
Right.
And
right.
I had to learn that actually, if there were certain conditions in place, I could say yes. So that was so the best time to set a boundary is before you have to.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
Possible if you know what, but it's a clue for you. So she same client was being interviewed for a video, and the guy just sent this stuff over and said, here's some questions, can you answer all the stuff, and it's going to be half an hour with you and your daughter. And she was like, I can't do this. I said yes, but I'm dreading it, it's going to be awful. And she was practically in tears thinking about it. And so we went over what her needs were. What would your motivation, like, where's your motivation now to do this? Like 0 out of 10. What would make it a 5 out of 10? And it was like, well, if it was shorter, if it was 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or if I knew what the content was. So what she ended up doing was setting a boundary, which was, it's going to be 15 minutes, and I need to know the questions ahead of time. And I need some control over some of those. Right. And as soon as she did that, she was able to say yes. And so in that situation, that's just one situation, but it frees you up. It stops you hiding in the shell,
Absolutely.
I mean, we're super sensitive. We were talking about this before this this talk. We were talking about just COVID and being out there with masks and just being a sensory being like we are. we're super porous, right? And so we go out there into the world, and the world can completely overwhelm us. So we need those boundaries. They're like our shield from, all this stuff, So those boundaries might be, if we go to the mall, it can only be for half an hour.
Absolutely.
If I'm going to your house for Christmas or Thanksgiving, I need an escape route.
Absolutely.
I need to be able to sit next to this person. I need to just arrive 5 minutes before we sit down for dinner. I need to, not to be, you can go the other way and you can be controlling and try and control the other person. Boundaries about saying something that you need.
Right.
About telling people where the door is in that wall.
Right.
Rather than saying, you must do all these things in order to meet my needs. It's more like saying, I can only do this if these things are in place, or I'm more comfortable doing this if we can do it like this.
And being aware of that and you becoming okay with it, right? That's one of the things. I'm laughing. I had a big old grin as Diane was talking about having an escape plan. I mean, that's one of the things that I talk with my clients about all the time. Like, what's your out? Right? If how are you going to recalibrate? How are you going to kind of reset yourself? And I often joke, if you don't know me and you see me in a large social gathering, you might think I have some health issues because I excuse myself to the ladies' room an awful lot. I need to do that to get some space and to get some air and to have a little quiet. I love people, but I am sort of I'm not a full introvert. I'm not a full extrovert. I need a little bit of both, but I get overwhelmed and overstimulated like a lot of us with ADHD do. Diane and I roomed together at the last ADHD conference a couple of years ago. And I will walk 15 minutes to my room to spend 5 minutes alone in the quiet between sessions just to regroup. And I'm okay with that. I know what I need, and I'm okay with finding ways to give it to myself, right?
Yeah.
It really is you doing that work to, kind of explore what it is that you need, tap into that a little bit, and then find ways that you can give yourself permission to get it. And I think it kind of works both ways for a lot of us, learning how to say yes in a way that you're comfortable with, and learning how to say no in a way that you're comfortable with. That's something we see a lot with our clients as well. We take on too much. Again, that ADHD optimism, right? We see the possibilities, we see the potential, we get excited about things, we jump into things sometimes without really a lot of thought or a lot of exploration in terms of what we're getting ourselves into. And we find ourselves overloaded. A lot of us, like it's a chronic thing, chronically overloaded, chronically with too much on our plates. So again, having a way to language that, having a way to be comfortable saying, I want to do this. I can see that I'm excited about this, but this is how I can participate. And for me, that started with finding comfortable ways for me to say to me and to the other person, let me think about it, or give me a few days to think about how I can make this fit into my life, or give me a few days to look at my calendar. And I, being ADHD, I always have to say, I will get back to you by close of business on Friday, and then I have to set some sort of reminder or up for myself to make sure I do get back to that person. But I have to make it like kind of concrete and kind of specific, but I have to give myself that space. Otherwise I can be like my own worst enemy, because I can be like a runaway train.
Yeah.
I want to do it. I'm excited about it. I can see the potential. I can see the possibilities. And, I feel all in the moment, but that all in impulse, that feeling is something I've learned to pay attention to, because it will get me in trouble.
Yeah.
And whether that's one more client, one more program, one more, in every area of my life, I often tell my clients, I literally have my own sort of way that I clock my work hours, not like, an employer would. Some employers want to make sure you're getting all your hours in. Mine is a not to exceed number. If I don't keep track, then I start to my work starts to creep into the rest of my world. I love what I do,
Yeah.
but too much of a good thing is still too much, right? I have to
Yeah.
have that boundary for myself. So I
Yeah.
don't work after a certain time unless it's pre-planned. I don't work over a certain number of hours, unless I have, that's something I decide in advance.
And that brings up a really good point, actually, Lynn, because boundaries is time too, right? So the boundary of time. Like I had a client this week talking about, look, how do I speed up my work? I'm really slow, and the first thing I asked her was, do you take the weekend off, and what are your work hours?
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have any.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's something you got to fix right now, because if you're
Right.
ADHD and you're time blind and you don't have a boundary, well, then you just took away motivation.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
If you were
Absolutely.
if you were in my gym class and I asked you to get down the floor and do a plank, and they did not tell you how long it's going to be for, how motivated are you to to do that right now? So, but if I say, okay, it's only 2 minutes, and you can put your elbows down if you want to, you'll be like, okay, I can do this, right? So you shoot yourself in the foot and you remove your motivation and your
Absolutely.
focus when you take away a boundary, right? So
Absolutely.
boundaries are not just, boundaries are chunking,
Mm-hmm.
but they traverse tasks, and they move into relationships as well, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, so I'm with you. I mean, it's just like over time, just getting more and more comfortable having that pause to say, let me think about that.
Yeah.
I need to get back to you, and the more comfortable I got saying it, the more aware I got when I was in that moment
Yes.
of overextension, like being
Absolutely.
at the conference and starting to feel flushed,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a clue for me. Like in the past, I would have ignored that. I
Oh,
would
I
think,
pushed past it, right?
push through,
Mm-hmm.
all myself. And now I'm like, okay, I need to take a break. And it was great rooming with you. And I don't think I could have done it with anybody else, because there were times even in the same room where I'd be doing a bit of stretching and you'd be
Mm-hmm.
doing, and we wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
talk to each other. It was like this, understanding
Yeah.
that you needed your little bubble for that moment, and I needed mine. That we had done so much talking and giving and taking that we
Mm-hmm.
just moment,
Yeah. And that's, but we've known each other for a very long time, and we can communicate about those things. And there's no shame there, and there shouldn't be. There's no
No.
guilt there. And learning how to have those conversations with the people around us is really important. And it's important for them as well. And whether it's your partner or your spouse or your children or your coworkers or your friends.
Yeah.
Right? It's just as important for them as it is for you, for them to learn the boundaries, for them to learn what you need, and for them to see you advocate for yourself. But if you don't own it, if you don't acknowledge it, if you don't accept it and learn to do it in a way that you're comfortable with, you're always going to be feeling like you're burning the candle at both ends. You're always going to feel like you're shut down. Either you're giving too much or you're being taken from too much. And, I always say, you guys have heard me say this before, I'm sure, we all have a finite pool of time, energy, and bandwidth. And we have to be careful of how we allocate those resources. We have to be thoughtful and we have to be intentional. And that doesn't mean selfish. They're very different things.
It is hard, especially if you grew up in a ADHD home where everybody was trampling over your boundaries. I remember very clearly the first time I started to set boundaries with my husband, being intensely uncomfortable, saying no.
Absolutely.
Like, oh my God. And it's still the hardest thing I have to do, is to say what I think is no, when actually it's yes, but ... So,
right. Or not yet, but ...
yes.
Right?
Well, this is what's happening for me. When you say that, what comes up for me is all of this stuff. I'm not, so let me think about it. I'm not saying no,
right.
But we need a way to sort through some of that stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
But, it is a muscle that you grow. It does get better, but then you can step into saying yes more and doing more,
absolutely.
because in charge of the show. You get to say, well, yeah, I can only do 15 minutes. I'm only going to do half an hour. I'm only, but that doesn't come overnight. It is practice,
It is. And what I would recommend for starters is to start to pay attention to where they're instinctively there are places when we know a line is being crossed, right?
Yes.
We don't always notice it for that. But if you're dreading something, or if you are overwhelmed by something, or if you are resisting something, a lot of times that is a boundary. If you are overcommitted, as so many of us are, right? Time, energy, and bandwidth, being stretched to the limit, taking a look at the next time something comes at you, whether it's something you want to do or something someone else wants from you, that's an opportunity for you to start to practice. That doesn't mean that you're going to get it 100% right the first time. That doesn't mean that you're going to set a rock solid boundary, whatever the heck that means, that you're super comfortable with the first time. But just start with, let me think about it. Can I get back to you?
Yeah, pause.
That can make a huge difference. And that's, I still, it's much clearer to me now after all these years, what I have time for and energy for and bandwidth for and what I don't. But that doesn't mean that there are not I'm not saying this, I'm saying it backwards, but that doesn't always mean that I don't really want to do the new thing, right? That doesn't, so I have to also have that kind of think about it process for myself internally as well. It's not just about boundaries with other people. So the more you kind of practice, just let me think about it, or let me get back to you, the easier it's going to be for you to see like where you really are on this thing, to create that space for yourself to decide, what is it that I really want to do? What is it that I really have the time and the energy and the bandwidth or whatever to do? And, and also like, what do I want?
Yeah. I mean, like what you're talking about as well, like it comes up a lot in COVID where people are working from home and there's a couple.
Oh my goodness.
Like they're interrupting each other in work, and you need a boundary. You need to be able to have that conversation that, like when you interrupt me, it's really hard for me to get back to my work, if ever. Right.
Right.
And sometimes that's not a in the moment thing. Right. So me and my husband had to contract over that. When we were available, we had to start shutting doors, which I wasn't comfortable with. I told myself that what this was cold, unfeeling, business-like. This didn't belong in a relationship. What the biggest surprise to me, Lynn, about boundaries is they actually bring more intimacy.
Yes.
Because they create safety and availability. So now instead of Kieran walking to a space and me going, oh, geez, there he is. Oh my God, I need to avoid him because he's going to start talking and he'll never stop talking and then I won't get back to my work. So I'm just not going to pay attention to him and I'll ignore him. So now he walks into a room, and he knows if I'm not looking at him, I'm not ignoring him, I'm in the middle of something, he will actually ask. Even though he's ADHD, and say, well, most of the time, okay, 90% of the time now.
Most of the time, right.
He'll say, is this a good time? And I'll say, no. Or I'll say, yes, I get to make that decision. But that was a process. That took time.
Yeah.
Actually created more closeness, because now when he walks into the room, I'm not doing this stupid dance, this passive aggressive, like I need to not make eye contact in case you actually start talking. We've actually talked about it.
Absolutely. It all starts with awareness and finding a way to start to do it that you're comfortable with. Absolutely. So practice it, guys. The upcoming holidays are a really good opportunity for that. There are plenty of opportunities all year round, though. Let's just, for real. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts you want to share with our listeners, Diane, and then tell our listeners again how they can learn more about you and what you do and get in touch with you if they'd like to?
Well, if they come to my website, Lynn, DianeO'Reilly.com, I have a blog on boundaries. I'm considering, and I'm saying considering because I'm setting a boundary for myself, that I'm going to do a boundary workshop, but it will not be till at least the spring. And I do have a handout on codependency and ADHD because for some people, boundaries is kind of a vague issue and they still really don't get it. So it kind of sets out a lot of questions that help you clarify. You know, for me, when I first read it, it was like, oh my God, that's a boundary crossing. I thought that was totally normal and healthy and okay. And actually, no, it's not. So I do have a handout for that. So again, DianeO'Reilly.com. You can find me on Instagram at your.real.adhdlife. So yeah, I'd love to meet you all there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being with us, Diane. I hope our listeners found this conversation helpful. I think it's a really important topic for so many of us. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, please feel free to join us in the ADHD Support Talk Facebook community where we can connect and share and grow together. Thanks again, Diane, and thank you all for listening. As always, I appreciate your attention. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.